Hello and welcome back to Exeter and Laira. You're watching the next episode of the build series, and in this video I'm going to show you how I've progressed on with the car park areas, the level crossing, and as well as that, some added greenery as well. Okay, so you join me back over on this north end, and I've already started making preparations. As you can see, I've polyfilled this area here. If you remember from the previous video, the grey board did actually step down in ready for smoothing the road surface out, so it's one continuous nice gentle slope up there. I've also added some of the ground cover to these areas here. Going to be lots of weeds and grasses and stuff all in here, and this is just the same ground cover that I've used in between the lines, which is the calci sand or chinchilla sand mixed with just ordinary grey tile grout. Okay, so I've now got all this area sanded down. The road is now pretty reasonably level, nice and flat, and just giving a quick coat of grey and scored a line through there, which will give the divide between the actual road and the car park. Now, as we move over to the car park itself, I'm going to completely redress this. I've never been happy with it, so moving towards doing a completely different new surface on top of this. So let's go through the products I'm going to use and how I'm going to make this look more realistic. So basically, with my recent visit to St David's, I noticed the car park itself, though it's a tarmac car park, generally speaking there's a lot of loose gravel of fine chippings and stuff over the car park, most of it being in the areas where cars would park, whereas the road areas where the cars would travel around, a little bit thinner. So all I've got is some sifted sand. Now this is gravel from a driveway actually, and I've sifted this through a kitchen sieve, and this is the coarse stuff, and then just with a nylon stocking over the actual sieve, sift it through to get some of the finer stuff. So for the car park I'm going to use the finer stuff, and let's go through and show you how I'm going to put this down. Okay, so these are the things I'm going to be using, and what we want down in the pot. It's a nice healthy dollop of raw umber, some white, some yellow. Now, for the quantity I've got there, I'm going to add roughly about the same amount of PVA glue. And just to dilute that down, give it a good mix up. So that's all mixed up, and we'll aim for something that's single cream, I guess. Plenty of PVA glue in there, and the glue itself just also prevents it drying out too quick as well. So I've given that a good even coverage, and what I've got now is my fine mix of the gravel, and this is inside a lid from an aerosol can, and the tights over the surface. And I'm just going to give this a nice coverage. And of course I want the thicker areas around where the cars would actually park. So there we go, that's now had the gravel effect applied over the surface, and the best thing you can do now is leave it to dry. Don't get put off by the colour of it. There will be further tones added to it as we go along, just to blend it in to the surrounding areas. You see that some areas have gone quite heavy, left a few areas fairly thin. Okay, so that's dried overnight, and as you can see I've got the texture that I wanted, however slightly the wrong colour. So I'm going to fix this now by just using 3 diluted paints, different colours: raw umber, grey, white, all nice watered down, with a drop of washing up liquid in there. Thinking where this is going to go, so I'm going to pipette this on and completely transform the colour. As you can see, that's had some time overnight to dry, and yeah, I don't think it looks too bad. It's heading in the right direction. Just going to probably apply a little bit more grey to it, and again, you can always add various shades to it if you overdo a dark colour. Again, just add a bit more white. So I'm going to crack on, get another coat over that, and we'll come back and catch up with this area later on in the video. Okay, so I've already now completed this road surface, and I didn't actually film any further steps after I've done the previous clips. The process was pretty much the same, however there was 1 or 2 things that were slightly different that I did at the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the methods I've done to create some really interesting effects that have popped up on here. You've got areas similar to this, which are almost identical to sort of like a really sort of worn road surface with very light potholes. So flicking back through some of the video clips and the pictures I took of the process of doing this particular effect, what I discovered was when I first put the first layer down, I'd mixed up all the paint basically. So what I had was a lot of white, a lot of grey, and very random areas of black. I didn't actually use any of the brown in the end. The sand that or the gravel that's laid down from the beginning actually gives you that brown effect, so you don't need to worry about the brown. What I did with the second coat, used the same sort of system again, but stuck with just the one single colour, and I randomly in areas didn't cover the whole surface, so I would leave a very small patch of the first coat still exposed. Now I assume that these pothole areas were actually created by possibly the bubbles from the black paint that were on the surface when I did the first coat. Most of them I did pop, however there were one or two which probably just left on the surface, and as they've dried they've left the dark rings around these areas. And for the third and final coat, what I did was just use an almost sort of mid to dark grey, similar sort of wash again of paint with washing up liquid, and I've just pretty much dry brushed that over the surface. So basically just dip the brush in the pot, wipe it out on a piece of timber so you remove as much of the paint from the brush as possible, and then just dry brush over the surface. To do that you want to kind of try and mimic the direction of where the traffic would be flowing. So for example, around this sort of area I've kind of brushed deliberately in that direction, and with the parking spaces I've kind of mimicked the actions of, say, cars coming into their parking spaces, so you end up with those sort of lines creating that effect. So as I'm quite happy with this surface, I'm going to actually continue it onto the main road next to it as well. So I'm going to continue, as I've done a little sample just down there. Makes sense to do the same on this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is make a start on some of the line side detailing. I'll want to put a fence along here, obviously trackside fencing, to divide the car park off from the main lines. And what I've got ready for that is scale model scenery, the 5-foot Great Western fence posts. Now I specifically picked up just the posts, I didn't want the wire. I do find the wire might be a little bit too overscale, and we'll come back to the actual wire that I'm going to use on this once we get these posts in place. Now I've already removed the posts from the sprues and just popped them on this piece of wood held in place with blobs of blue tack, and given these a coat of grey, pretty much trying to create those concrete post effects. And once they're in position I can further weather those to sort of blend them in and make them look a little more natural. So the holes are drilled, space them out roughly about 1 inch apart, scale roughly about 6 foot. So let's pop them in. So I'm just going to try some products just along the fence line, just to create that sort of blend from the tarmac itself into the fence line and the track. And I just tried in this little corner here mixture of some materials. So I've used the coarse gravel mix that I had, and I'm just also going to use some fine turf burnt grass. Now I'm going to go along the edges and just spread some PVA glue carefully so I don't get it all over the cable trunking, and we'll sprinkle these bits and pieces around it, and hopefully that should give me the effect that I'm after. So I've just pipetted some 50-50 mix of PVA glue and water, a bit of washing up liquid along this edge just to soak down through the ground covering there. I'll come back to that later on once that's dry. Hopefully it should dry how I want it. But for now I'm going to focus now on these two small patches here. Okay, so taking a look at these two small patches of Wasteland, which are sort of in a roundabout. Already done the preparations for the base colours and tones on this one, so I'm going to move over to this one and show you how I've set these bits down. So what I've got is some diluted PVA, and I'm just going to lay that down like so, and just using a bit of woodland scenic spine turf in earth, I'm just going to gently sprinkle that over the surface of the wet glue. And then just switching over and using burnt grass, fine turf, again just add a bit of variation to the colours. And then I'm just using the coarse gravel that I've used for the fence line edges, and just going to try and feather those in. And just pushing them down. And just to tie it in, a bit of coarse turf in burnt grass as well. And that'll just give me my low lying weeds. And then just leave that to dry, and we'll come back to this in a while. Okay, so we've now got all those fence posts in, and even with that alone just makes such a massive difference. So now I've got the tedious task of threading the wire through, and I've got, I think it's about 36 posts. Each post has about 7 holes, and this is going to be quite a long job. You can just about make out there at the bottom of the posts I have some wire, and this is some fishing line, and I specifically picked up something with a very small break-in strain, as you're going to guarantee that's going to be really thin. Now the only problem I'm going to get by using this particular line is once it goes through all the posts it's going to be barely visible. So what I've done is I've coiled enough around this pencil and sprayed it silver. What I'm going to do now is focus back on these two areas. Going to get some of the grasses down in here, and all my grasses I'm using at the moment are from Green Scene. So what I'll do is I'll talk through as I'm going along with what types of grass I'm using. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, just with some PVA glue, just go around in a few random areas. Wherever you want your grasses, get some PVA glue down. So I've got my glues in places, and what I'm going to do first of all, I'm using a 2mm straw, and I'm not going to use the applicator on this. I'm just going to sprinkle these where the glue has been laid down. And just with a brush, I'm just going to press all this down into the glue. Trying to avoid having this particular layer standing upright, so it gives the illusion that the dead grass or the straw stuff's a lot shorter than the 2mm size it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just apply just a little bit more PVA glue. This time I'm just going to get a bit more around in a few more areas where you want some of the longer grasses to be. Okay, so in my static grass applicator I've got 4mm summer grass and 6mm straw, and this is going to give me the height for obviously the meadow grasses that you typically see with all the seed heads on. Simple as that. Now we're just going to leave that to dry, and once that's dry we'll vac all the excess off. Okay, so we're now going to move back to this area and add further details to this, some more greenery, bushes, shrubs, and various plant hues, just to bring the scene to life. I'm going to show you the products I'm using. If you haven't seen my previous video, that gives an in-depth detail of how to use them. So I'm going to start off with using the coloured hues and the flower system. So this is a Woodland Scenics products, and these 3 packets that are in front of you here are the actual from the field system. So you get 4 different colours. These are ideal for applying the shadows to all the grass. And these ones here are often quite good for creating the seed heads that you see on meadow grass. And I'm just going to use the yellow flowers as well, just to bring the grass to life and create some wild flowers. On top of that as well, I'm going to create the effect of weeds, leaves and stuff that grow through the grass by just using the knock leaves. as you can see, I've made a start on the road markings. So what I'm going to do is just quickly talk you through how I'm going about doing these ones. And notably, St David's level crossing has a solid white line, or a double solid white line that flows all the way through the crossing, and I'll show you exactly how I'm going to do that. So the first thing you're going to need, some masking tapes. Now what I've got here is some 18mm thick stuff, and I've also got some 2mm stuff as well. So what I'll do is I'll get the level crossing area masked off first, and then I'll come back and show you how I've done that in preparation for the two solid white lines. I've masked in ready for the double white solid line, and what we've got in the middle is the 2mm precision tape, and outer edge was 18mm, and because it's difficult to bend the thicker tape, I've just used a small piece of 6mm tape, which gives me the ability just to bend it around that slight bend. And with the paint I'm using is just some ready mixed white paint from Hobbycraft, cheap and cheerful. And what I do is I pour some out, leave it there in that pot for a couple of days before I start using it, and that way it dries, begins to dry, and it becomes less likely to seep underneath the tape. And what I'm going to do, using a very small sponge, simple as that, dab your way along. Once you've done it, remove the tape. Masking tape's off, and as I knew from the test pieces down here, I knew it was going to lift some of the paint, as this area is completely polyfiller, and bearing in mind that what goes on top of it is almost a wash, so it's not going to stick very well, and masking tape obviously helps it along to be pulled off. Now it's not a problem, as you can see down here I've already touched it in. This is the first stages, and what I'll do is I'll come back down here with a little bit more of a wash to try and blend these pieces in, but I think they look okay anyway, as it kind of resembles sort of potholes that have been filled in. Again, another little mishap here on the level crossing panel. Did take some of the paint off of that, removing the masking, so I should try and patch that piece in with a closest colour match as I possibly can, but other than that, quite pleased with that. Got a nice general worn effect over it all, which now means that the rest of the road should be fairly easy, and hopefully shouldn't pull any of the paint off. So there we go, that now pretty much concludes all the road markings. Pretty pleased with how they turned out, just exactly as I was hoping them to look like. And you can see I've just repaired some of the road areas where obviously the masking tape had lifted some of the paint, and again I quite like that. That sort of just gives the illusion of just small repairs to the tarmac surface. And again, just a couple of little mistakes I've made. The solid white lines were supposed to end about here, and it was supposed to have been just normal road markings thereafter. But again, that's kind of easy to rectify. As it's a sandy surface, I can just sand back and reapply those. But generally speaking, I'm really happy with how it's all turned out. Looks really good, really pleased with that. Well anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video and you've got something quite useful from it. As always, I'll be back again with another video. Not quite sure which one yet, but there's still plenty going on. And as always, if you've got comments or questions, please do drop them down in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer whatever I can. Thanks for watching.